Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for who has been resisting this intense day and staying still with us. Thank you, Matt and Mia and Kevin for inviting us, and the whole team of Marine Money. You know, we have been listening the whole morning, very interesting ideas, financing, nothing happens without it, but we have heard a lot of issues regarding sanctions, regarding geopolitical issues that are changing every day, what is happening around shipping. The main thing of this afternoon is decarbonization. Everybody's talking about it, maybe have talked a lot about it, and everybody knows by now what to do. But I have the pleasure to have some top executives today with us who I think will be very interesting to listen what they are thinking towards this path to what IMO probably has set for 2050, and the ships that are going to be around at that time have to be decided to be built in the next years, but also retrofitting of existing fleets is a complicated situation, and I think it will be nice to listen to what we think. I'm Spyridon Zolotas, Senior Director for RINA. RINA is a classification society. Classification society sometimes with many ideas. We give a headache to the owners by telling a lot of ideas, but you know, the main scope is to find out what should be the next step. Could be hydrogen. We are developing some ideas on producing hydrogen on board, probably change of propellers. We listened before that change of propellers could be an idea for existing fleets. But let's see what I will introduce now in the panel that we have today. And we have Charis Plakantonaki with us from Starbuck, as the Chief Strategy Officer of Starbuck Carriers. David Watts, who is the Vice President of Business Development for Signal Group. We have Rein Steeman, who is the Commercial Director of Value Maritime, and Mladen Matak, who is the Managing Director of Tanker Croatia, Thome. So let me ask this. Let me start this discussion by a couple of questions. I think Charis and Mladen, you operate fleets, and I think it would be interesting to know what are your plans. You know, from the 1st of January 2023, we have the CII coming, and you have to be, the vessel should be ready, let's say, by then, and should be operated and remain in a proper rating. Charis, I will start with you. What is your medium-term plans, and what would be for the future, because it's not only 2023?
Thank you, Spyro. And thank you to the Marine Money team for inviting me to speak here today. Indeed, timely and efficient compliance with the environmental regulations is a top priority for our company. And as an example, back for IMO 2020, we had a massive program to retrofit the majority of our fleet with exhaust gas cleaning systems. Now, at least to me, IMO 2020 feels like a generation ago. I don't know about the rest of you, because as soon as we implemented the global sulfur cap, we started discussing about decarbonization. And to give context to our strategy, it is important to give also some background on environmental regulations, and a lot has been discussed today in previous panels and by previous panelists, so I won't be repeating the same. It is important to understand that what we have ahead of us at the global level is a medium-term target by 2030, which is related to carbon intensity, and this requires operational and technical measures to be adopted by ship owners. And there are also discussions at an IMO level about medium-term measures, such as market-based measures, for example, carbon taxation. And then the second challenge ahead of us is the long-term ambition of the IMO, which by 2050 requires a 50% reduction in global emissions derived from shipping, or a net zero, which is a much bigger ambition that is currently being debated at an IMO level. So this is what happens at the global level. We also have the regional level, where we do see Europe also discussing a number of green environmental regulations. These are still in the making of and are yet to be decided, like, for example, the inclusion of shipping in the European trading scheme. Now, what does all this mean for a ship owner? Starting with the short-term measures, it is important for us to monitor the performance of our vessels as timely and as accurately as possible, which means that we're placing a lot of focus on installing telemetry on board our vessels. We also have an in-house vessel performance monitoring team in our company This is not something new for Starbucks. We have been doing it for quite a few years, also because it gives us cost savings and makes the company more profitable, but by being more energy efficient. What's new today is that we're upgrading the sensors that we have on board, the torque meters, the flow meters, the equipment to capture high-frequency data in order to be in a position to continuously measure the CII of our vessels and to be able to improve on that. Because if you don't know how much you're emitting, you're not in a position then to reduce it. This is one thing. Then we also look into developing new capabilities and new roles in the company. For example, we have developed an R&D team in order to continuously look into new solutions for technical and operational measures. We have an energy efficiency team, which is new, to continuously look to improve our CII. And then we also have the actual technical and operational measures that we're adopting. So what are those? You mentioned a few, Spiro, earlier. So for example, we're looking into installing energy-saving devices, and actually we have already completed a few retrofits. We're performing engine power limitation to our vessels in order to comply with EEXI. We're looking into pilots related to advanced anti-fouling paints with reduced hull roughness. We're looking into remotely operated hull cleaning robots. We're also piloting platforms which improve the voyage optimization, whether we talk about optimal speed or optimal routes. Now, all these solutions are currently underway, and we expect that all this will enable us to continuously improve the energy efficiency of our fleet. It's worth noting that our #1 priority for the short term is to keep the hulls of our vessels as clean as possible. So this is the area where we see the biggest area for improvement in order to improve the energy efficiency of our fleet. Which now brings me to the longer run that, Spiro, you mentioned. We have the 2050 target where energy efficiency will not be enough. As a company, this is also very consistent with our overall vision, which is to be leaders in sustainable dry bulk shipping. And in that respect, we are participating in the research and development, both related to carbon capture and storage on board the vessel, but also related to green fuels. CCS, which is carbon capture storage on board, is a solution which we believe will accelerate faster than green fuels. The reason for that is that CCS will enable existing vessels which burn on fossil fuels, but also new building vessels which will burn fossil fuels to continue trading for many more years. Now, anticipating the question of how many these years will be, this will very much depend on the trajectory that the IMO chooses, whether it will be a 50% reduction or a net zero. But also it will depend on the percentage of carbon that this technology will be able to capture. Now, with regards to green fuels, we're fuel agnostic. So we're looking into all available, all potential solutions, whether this is biofuels, ammonia, methanol, even nuclear. A lot of uncertainty exists when it comes to green fuels, a lot of unknown parameters. So the best we can do as a company right now is to participate in R&D, to look into the feasibility of these different fuels, to stay in touch and participate in partnerships with other stakeholders of the industry in order to stay abreast of developments. So to sum up, short-term solutions exist. They also have a payback period for ship owners because we're able to reduce the fuel consumption. But for the longer run, solutions are in the making of. And there we do need to see synergies also with other sectors, but also government spending in order for developments to accelerate. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Charis. You touched a very important point, which is that other stakeholders could also, and other industries, could also play a role on the fuel of shipping. Some people say that shipping has to choose its own fuel. I was in Cyprus last week, and in the Cyprus Shipping Summit, somebody said that this should be methanol, definitely Finnish. But I don't think that shipping is to choose its own fuel. There are so many other sectors that will drive this way forward, and of course, shipping will have to take its part on it. Of course, carbon capture on the way forward is definitely either pre-combustion or post-combustion. Combustion, as we call it, carbon capture could play a role, but there are some other more experts than me to talk about it. I would like to go to Mladen. Since, Mladen, you are operating on behalf of your owners, you're providing technical management. what would you recommend them in all this? What is coming? What would you recommend to your clients? What actions are you taking in respect to what we have heard before by Charis regarding not having stranded assets in the end of the day after 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, they do their own homework before they come to us. Early engagements with us as a technical managers, it's very important. But I would like to touch on three things. Before there are alternative fuel, there has to be alternative infrastructure, alternative regulation, and alternative training. Probably you think I'm stating obvious, but I'm saying this based on a past experience. In a previous life, I was leading team that obtained the license to do, if not first, one of the first LNG bunker barges in Europe, and I know how long it takes. So in terms of training, probably people will say training is available, but as soon as that fuel comes out, owners need to be aware they don't do tick box exercise training, because training facilities will start popping out around the world. In terms of regulations and infrastructure, if you go in Port of Piraeus and you tell them that you would like to do ammonia bunkering tomorrow, you will see how long it would take you. Probably people are saying, you know, I will order my ship now and it will be ready in 5 years. And in 5 years' time, everything will be hanky-dory, but that's not the case. Again, speaking from a practical experience. So those three things are something that people really need to be experienced. Dry fleet, you're talking about ammonia, you're talking about methanol, you're talking about LNG. With all due respect, people are not used to managing liquids. They have to be extremely careful. Training part, you think that people are willing to navigate and operate the vessel with ammonia, knowing what ammonia brings. So those are the number of questions where really owners need to be aware. In practical terms, LNG is there. You reduce everything by most of stuff. Actually, you reduce 25% in the start. It's there. It's proven. It's available. Two other fuels that are in equation are, still to be proven or still to be available. And I would put certainly liquid hydrogen on the side. We know that there are first liquid hydrogen trip being completed by Swiss or Frontier, but there is lots of things behind that trip. So three things to be aware of: training, available infrastructure, and regulations as well.
Absolutely agree that, yes, regulations probably could be a drive forward, but then the other aspects that you mentioned are very important. Talking about hydrogen, talking about LNG, yes, I think it could be a transitional fuel, as we say. It is available. We know how to handle it. Many of the issues like methane slip are being handled. We had an idea of producing through LNG hydrogen on board in the quantities that can be burned by the engine, so reducing, as you understand, the carbon emissions of the engines. But I don't want to be more technical, otherwise I think nobody will remain there. We will have to move there to continue our discussion. Talking about what I heard from Charis and Mladen about your ideas for the future, any decision is based on information, is based on data, is based on data, but what data? And I would like to go to David and ask you.
Data.
You have the crystal ball, David?
I could answer that in very many ways. I won't, because it's very rude. But it's interesting when you talk about data, because I'm one of those sad people that actually quite likes data. And I have to admit that on a stage in front of 30, 40, 50 people. And by the way, well done for staying in the room, guys, because these are really important issues. Those guys out there having a chat, they are missing out hugely on the amount of insight that you guys are getting here. So well done for staying. So thank you to all you. We should be thanking you. Well done. But I'm going to just read back a few comments that earlier speakers mentioned, because they really stood out to me. And this is not because I know them, because I don't know pretty much anybody here. But anyway, so Stavros from Sea Energy said about capital markets being an important tool to us. We had Charis from Sakos and Doug from Jefferies talked about how those financial markets or capital markets have been supporting Maritime for generations, which we tend to forget. We then also heard Hughes from DNB and Simon from Simos from Starbuck talk about Poseidon principles and the ratings of vessels. And we heard also, I think it was, I can't read my writing here, but a gentleman from Neptune talked about ratings as well. All that comes from the analysis of data, and it's amazing to hear what Starbuck are doing with your fleet. Not many people can do that. Not many organizations are able to put those sorts of metrics and tools on their vessels to be able to get the data to understand how the vessels are performing. So I work for Signal. Signal do three things. We run a group of ships, nowhere near as many as Starbuck, but we have about 40 or so Aframax and MRs. We have an investment business, and we have a data business, Signal Ocean Platform. And what that allows us to do for any vessel, not in our fleet, any vessel in the world, a bit like yourself, you said earlier a moment ago, about what does this ship look like? How does this ship operate? Right at the beginning of the day, we heard about, oh my gosh, CII, it's the wrong metric. It should be EEXI or EEOI or maybe EEDVI or maybe AER. Just throw an acronym in there, it could be good ones to use. But the great thing about data is once you have the data by vessel for every commercial activity, the consumption curves, what it's doing, where it's doing it, based on weather conditions, and once you have that for every ship, all you need to do is ask the data the question. And that question can be, how well is my ship performing compared to its peers? How well could my ship perform should I look to enhance it through a scrubber or other sort of enhancements? If I were to do that, would that improve the utilization of the vessel? But the other underlying factor, and I'll wrap up here, is regulations coming down the track. We've already mentioned it, you've mentioned it as well. That's not going away. So those people outside, regulation doesn't matter. It's not going away. You might not want to listen. So actually knowing what's going on, understanding the impact, and understanding your future exposure not only gives you a position to manage your risk now, but the price of carbon on the EU ETS futures markets is a very, very volatile market. It's been the last 6 or 7 weeks, it's gone from $96 a ton down to $66 a ton. So if you're not managing your risk in your future exposure through capital markets, through financial markets, then you're probably not doing yourself a favor, and you're certainly not servicing your shareholders very well. So data, I believe, is the core to creating information, and information allows you to have the insight to make an informed decision, which clearly Starbuck and the guys here are doing. So well done, and I'll stop there.
Don't stop, because I wanted to insist a little bit on that, because it comes up to my mind. I had discussions. We also at RINA believe a lot on digitalization and collecting data, interpreting data. Many of our clients say, but okay, I get the data, then I have to rely on this data. How can I prove that these are reliable data? And one thing more, which is also goes to what Mladen said on training. Are my people training to interpret properly this data? Do I need an additional team to follow only the data, which is cost as well? What would you like to comment on that?
Again, it's about scale here. And organizations that have the scale to do that, such as Starbuck, your old R&D teams, research teams, that's great that you can do that. But there's thousands of shipping organizations out there that just don't have that capacity. And that's where organizations like ourselves, like Climaco come and Marsoft come, because that's what we do. We provide services that allow organizations to use their data or our data or a fusion of both to try and make that level of insight. You don't have to be the experts, you just have to know the people that are the experts, and they can then service you through appropriate contractual obligations to help you make the right choices. So not every shipping company, not every charterer, not every broker or trader has to be the expert. They have to have the right network of contacts and suppliers that can help them make the right choices, I think.
Yeah, okay, David, okay. Thank you. Changing a little bit on another solution that among the ones that we could see going forward, we spoke before about carbon capture. And Rein, I would like to ask you, and there are many studies as well. I'm a naval architect. I'm not an analyst, but I read articles, and I see that fuel in the future will be fossil fuel will be around, and we expect even to 2050 to have at least 30% of fossil fuel for shipping. So what could you comment on that? How would you bring us forward to that direction with what you propose?
Well, I think from my own opinion, you're right. But if I heard well today in the different panels with all the expertise and the knowledge in shipping, that they also agree on that. So then we have to make, well, the answer is, of course, the solution is not easy, but the answer is we have to make every vessel a little bit greener, and we should help them out with all different and new technologies. And well, because you asked me, the technology I would suggest, of course, is that, well, for us, we are able to capture the carbon. Then first, we have to clean the exhaust. We take out the particular matter. But by doing so, we are also able to capture the carbon, and we can reduce the emissions by up to 50%, depending the vessel and the size. But that's something we can do. And then what you also heard today, I was happy with that because as a sales guy, nobody believes it, but from Starbucks, they told me that it is from CAPEX point of view, it is very interesting to do so. So that combined, I think that is good to do. And then you have all the flexibility. Because after 2 years, the whole system is paid back and you are able to capture carbon. So then the flexibility is in the case that either ETS or any other regulation what will comes in, then you can choose either you pay ETS or you will use your carbon capture module and you will reuse the CO2. And for the short run, the CO2, we can easily use that in greenhouses. There are a lot of greenhouses, they require a lot of CO2. But on the other hand, maybe for the long run, and I heard upon the methanol, for production methanol, CO2 is required. So in that case, if you capture the CO2 from the vessel, we can bring it to the methanol plant and then you can reuse it again by operating, if you have a dual fuel engine with methanol. So I think with small steps like that, or even big steps, then I think that will bring it forward to make it fit for 2050, 55. And we are definitely a good piece of the puzzle there. Yeah.
Yes, great, that's fine. But do you think the logistics, let's say, I think that is developing in a whole economy, CO2 as a commodity, and then this will seems to be happen. Do you think that this will happen soon? Do you think we need special, let's say, infrastructure around the world for tramp shipping or other shipping, or this is a solution that could be only for specific, let's say, areas like North Europe, probably, or specific type of vessels, like probably container vessels or other?
Well, from the point today, it is the northern part of Europe with the greenhouses. But of course, it will develop over time quickly. We are in discussions for China and Japan with shipping companies. They want to share, they want to open outlets for CO2. And well, as you heard it today, this is a really hot topic to find those outlets. So yeah, as of today, it is there, but limited. But I mean, 6 months ago, there was nothing. And in the upcoming 1.5 years, I think we will have outlets all over the place. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I would go back to Mladen, on what you mentioned regarding training, but which I fully agree, because in the end of the day, whatever is coming on board is on the shoulders of the people on board, or ashore in the people that is supporting for all these people who are sailing the vessels. But due to this uncertainty on what will be the future fuels, what will be the technologies, how do you think this training could be already started now so that we are ready? Probably could be a cultural change on the companies facing, let's say, these new challenges. How do you think that this could be practically? Because you said we have to be practical in the end of the day. We have to run the vessels. How these training programs could be realized? What would you suggest for seafarers to start, companies to invest on their seafarers to do, a part of what they do now? Do you have any idea on that, or?
Obviously, all depends on the money that you have and how much money you're willing to spend on training. I've seen, as I mentioned earlier, I ran the team that did, if not the first, but probably one of the first few bunker barges in Port of Rotterdam, and a client that we did the bunkering with, they built a full replica, exactly the same replica as the replica on board the vessel, 1-to-1. And their people were, they hit ground running. They were completely ready because whatever that was on board the vessel, it was in the training center. Obviously, lots of companies will not be able to afford that, but if you know well in advance what you're planning to do, there is a means of practical training in collaboration with the people from the industry, paying for that training, putting people on board the vessel, working with the flags and societies, what they actually need to obtain, for your crew to obtain the certificate, because you're very limited maneuvering space. You have to do tick the certain boxes before your crew is certified to handle that cargoes. So obviously, planning is key of success.
And then we don't have to forget that safety is of paramount importance. They are making gestures that we have to. But I wanted, before closing, to give the floor to Charis and ask you, Charis, could you tell us, so that they give us 2 minutes, what would be the drive forward in order to arrive to all these couple of ideas? What would be the main thing that you would suggest, comment?
Thank you, Spyro. To identify the driving force, we have to look at the big picture. And look at the big picture, it is actually the public, it is the consumers that push for the fight against climate change. And it is the public then that drives the political will, and it is the politicians that drive the regulations. So we first need to see a very clear and ambitious regulatory framework. And just to give you an example of the uncertainty that exists today in the regulatory environment, I don't think that there is anyone here in this audience, and if there is one, please come and find me after this panel, that could answer the question of what will happen if a vessel is rated E in terms of CII, for example, in 2023, has a corrective plan in place, and then is rated E again in 2024. Will there be a penalty? What type of penalty will that be? And when will it be enforced? So even with the regulations that we have been talking about today, in every single panel, there's still a lot of uncertainty. So first, we need to see the ambition and the specific targets and the clarity at the regulatory level. Then it will have to be the governments that come into the picture and spend money in order to develop the infrastructure. Because as it has already been said by my fellow panelists, if we're not going to be seeing infrastructure in terms of production, of renewables, of green fuels, then it is very difficult to get to a net zero environment unless, of course, when carbon capture is so efficient that it can capture up to 100% of emissions. So regulators, governments, and then, of course, the industry will follow suit, same as it has done in the past. We had in the past regulations like IMO 2020, ballast water treatment systems. Our industry has always delivered. So the big difference today is that this regulation is not only shipping related. Shipping is just part of the global energy transition. So decarbonization is a challenge also for other sectors, which means that we should be seeing investments driven by governments which will be cross-sectoral and should help accelerate developments also in the shipping industry. So this is where I see the driving force being, and again, as I said, our industry will contribute. We already see a lot of industry fora and initiatives being formed to help accelerate developments, to create R&D, to create partnerships. The shipping industry will play its part, provided we have clear regulations and support from the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Charis. I have my own stopwatch. It is, yeah, okay, we are on time. We are on time, and we don't apologize
for keeping... over a glass of wine.
Okay, so I would like to thank Charis, David, Rein, and Mladen. Please give them a strong applause because they need it.